Welcome to our presentation. First, Synlait Milk Limited is a large dairy company in New Zealand that processes milk and cheese. Our group focuses heavily on prompt design to get accurate results from ChatGPT. As you can see on the left side of this slide, we wrote a very clear prompt and we taught the AI our exact task and IFRS 15 rules. Next, my group member will introduce the company overview and the specific financial details.
The company we selected is Synlait Milk Limited. They are a New Zealand dairy company headquartered in Canterbury that sells dairy and plant-based products, ingredients, and powders to customers around the world. They also manufacture milk powders and food service products such as infant formula. Along with over 280 milk suppliers across the Canterbury and Waikato region, they also have a subsidiary, Synlait Farms, that supply milk around the Dunsandale area in Canterbury. Synlait also owns two consumer dairy companies, Dairyworks and Talbot Forest Cheese. In 2023, however, Synlait announced its intention to sell its Dairyworks and Talbot Forest Cheese brands as the company refocuses its strategy towards advanced nutrition powders and food service products and away from consumer dairy. By late 2024, Synlait slumped to large losses after having unsustainable levels of debt, too much production capacity, and significantly higher interest rates.
The first significant provision from IFRS 15 that we had the tool look at was presentation of contract assets and contract liabilities. This provision states that performance by either party should be presented within the financial statements. ChatGPT found that trade receivables are represented on the financial statements, separately displayed on page 23 and in accordance with paragraph 108 of the standard. However, it also found that there was no disclosure of contract assets and contract liabilities. Because of this, it accepted the disclosure and presentation of the financial statements as it couldn't determine whether the balance was nil or immaterial for these items. However, we found that it stated in the revenue notes that payment terms vary depending on individual contracts, implying that there is likely prepayments on the books that would result in a contract liability. Therefore, we find that ChatGPT's observations lacked both depth and accuracy and did not pick up these details instead of jumping to conclusions. Another significant provision from the standard that we had the tool assess was disaggregation of revenue. This provision states that revenue recognized from contracts with customers should be disaggregated into categories to show stakeholders the nature, timing, amount, and uncertainty of revenue. ChatGPT found that the financial statement successfully disaggregated several categories such as product line, operating segments, and geographical region. On top of this, the financial statements also disclosed that the majority of its revenues were from 3 key customers. ChatGPT acknowledges that Synlait had provided extensive disclosure regarding categorization and concluded that users of the financial statement should be well informed. We find that this assessment by AI is fair, as there was appropriate categorization in the financial statements.
I will talk about IFRS 15 provisions 116 to 118 and provisions 119. First, provisions 116 to 118 are about contract balances. The company disclosed its trade receivable clearly. The balances decreased from $144.9 million to $95 million. However, the company did not separately disclose contract assets and the contract liabilities. The report also did not explain balance movements. There was no discussion about a relationship between payment timing and contract balances. For this reason, we agree with ChatGPT's conclusions of weak to moderate compliance. Next, provision 119 is about performance obligations. ChatGPT correctly found that revenue is recognized when goods are delivered and control transferred to customers. It also correctly found that revenue is measured net of returns, discounts, and allowance. However, the annual report does not specifically discuss return rights, warranties, and refund obligations. So we think ChatGPT's conclusion is reasonable. The company generally complies with provision 919, but the disclosures are not fully comprehensive.
Okay, let's talk about provisions 123 to 125. It requires disclosure of significant judgments affecting the timing and amount of revenue recognition. ChatGPT recognizes that the report provides judgment-related disclosures, but does not explicitly identify significant revenue recognition judgments. Based on these, it concluded there is a partial compliance in this part. However, according to the standard, detailed disclosure is mandatory only when these judgments significantly affect the determination. As a bulk and fast-moving consumer good dairy producer, Synlait's sales mode is based on the classic transfer of control upon delivery approach with highly standardized contract structures, considering that the application of the revenue standard does not involve complex or subjective judgments. Therefore, we conclude that the company is substantially compliant. So AI did a poor job here, we think. For the provision 126, it requires disclosure of methods, inputs, and assumptions used to determine transaction price. ChatGPT noticed that the report states that the revenue is measured according to the contract price, but does not explain the methodologies, assumptions, or estimation process. Due to this, it concluded a moderate but incomplete compliance. We think ChatGPT made an inaccurate statement here. In the annual report, page 33, there is a clear statement of method about transaction price determination, despite there is a minor flaw that no disclosure of inputs. And as a traditional dairy manufacturing entity, its transactions are highly reliant on standardized contract and spot deliveries, with no allocations of multiple performance obligations. Hence, based on the nature of silent and the principle of substance over form and materiality, we conclude that the company is substantially compliant rather than moderate but incomplete. Concluding comments. In summary, the AI report serves as a qualified preliminary screening tool at a framework compliance level. However, it reveals two conspicuous deficiencies in terms of analytical depth and task integrity. Lack of industry context, resulting in superficial and rigid commentaries. Complete omission of specific page citations, leaving the task execution imperfect. As a result, human intervention and professional judgment remain indispensable to achieve an accurate compliance conclusion.
In conclusion, AI plays an important role in accounting, but it still needs further development. First, AI is a great high-speed assistant. It can scan hundreds of pages in just a few seconds to find specific text and numbers. This saves us a lot of research time. However, the human anchor is still necessary. AI lacks business common sense. It cannot understand complex accounting ideas, like materiality or substance over form. Therefore, the human judgment remains the heart of accounting to ensure the financial integrity. Thank you for your time.